Dexter Holbrook begins his story about how a worn leather briefcase profoundly altered his perception of his father. In the mahogany-scented office of Harland and Partners, a phantom scent of cigars still lingered, a ghostly reminder of Raymond Holbrook, who had passed away 2 weeks prior. Dexter stood in the corner, observing the triumph of his brother Sterling, who seemed to be celebrating a foregone conclusion. $50 million, Sterling exclaimed, brandishing the inheritance documents like sacred texts. The entire Holbrook Hotel empire, 17 hotels, the Lake Forest estate, a lavish car collection. Father left me everything. With that, he uncorked a bottle of champagne he'd brought. The popping cork left a faint mark on the ceiling. Uncle Harland seemed to wince but said nothing. Sterling always behaved this way, celebrating prematurely, declaring victory before the final whistle. At 42, he was a mirror image of their father at that age, a strong jawline, piercing gray eyes, and an authoritative aura that made people unconsciously straighten up in his presence. Not entirely, Uncle Harland countered, adjusting his glasses. The 70-year-old younger brother of their father, the family attorney who had dedicated 4 decades to the Holbrook affairs, added, "Dexter is also inheriting something." Sterling burst out laughing, pouring champagne into the nearest coffee mug he grabbed from Harland's desk. "Oh, right. I completely forgot. So what did Dad leave you, Dex? Hopefully it's enough for a car better than your Honda." Dexter remained silent. At 38, teaching chemistry at Lincoln High, he had long accepted his role as the family disappointment. While Sterling joined their father in the hotel business immediately after graduating from Northwestern University, Dexter chose chalk and lesson plans. One sported $1,000 suits at board meetings, the other wore department store clothes to parent-teacher conferences. Both understood how things would turn out. Uncle Harland leaned down and retrieved an item from beneath his desk that made Dexter's heart sink. It was an old brown leather briefcase, so worn it looked as if it had been dragged across asphalt. One of the brass corners was covered in green patina. The leather handle was cracked in the middle and wrapped in electrical tape, and one of the 2 latches hung at an unnatural angle, as if it had been forced open and never repaired. "Raymond wanted you to have this," Harland said, handing the briefcase to Dexter. A silence fell over the room, lasting no more than 3 seconds. Then Sterling exploded. "Are you serious? That's it? That's his inheritance?" He laughed until tears streamed down his face, barely holding onto his champagne glass. "My God, Dex, do you know what this is?" "This is Dad's first briefcase, from back when he sold insurance door to door in the 70s, before he bought his first motel. He kept it in the library like a relic." Dexter took the briefcase. It was almost weightless, as if empty. The rough leather felt dry and neglected. A dark stain, perhaps from coffee or something worse, marred one side. The clasps wouldn't budge. It was unclear if they were locked or simply jammed. "He always said, 'You have to learn to appreciate hard work,'" Sterling continued, wiping away tears of laughter. "I guess he decided you should start where he did, 40 years later. Hey, maybe it has a list of his old insurance clients. You can call them up, offer your services." "Sterling, that's enough," Uncle Harland admonished, but his voice lacked firmness. "Oh, come on, Uncle Harland. Even you have to admit this is classic Dad." Dexter avoided the family business his whole life, preferring to tinker with test tubes and grade papers. And Dad left him a reminder of what real work looks like. It's just poetic. Dexter's mother watched the proceedings via video call from her apartment in Boca Raton. 3 years after divorcing his father, she had married a successful real estate developer named Philip. No emotion registered on her face as she observed her sons divide their father's inheritance. She had always been adept at concealing her thoughts behind an unreadable mask. In that moment, as hopes crumbled like a house of cards, Vivian murmured almost inaudibly, "Raymond always had his reasons," as if privy to something hidden from plain sight. The monitor screen went dark, severing the connection without a word of farewell, leaving behind only silence and bewilderment. Sterling, impeccably dressed in an Italian suit, rose from his chair, exuding confidence and superiority. "Well, little brother, if you ever need a job, I'm sure I can find a spot for you at one of our hotels," he said with a condescending tone. "Perhaps a bellhop? You're good at helping people after all. It's what you do as a teacher." A clap on the shoulder felt like a pronouncement, and Sterling was already pulling out his phone to share the triumphant news with his wife Miranda. On Harlan's desk, a half-empty bottle of champagne stood alone, like a symbol of a faded celebration. I stood, clutching the well-worn briefcase, and felt something shift inside me. Uncle Harlan's gaze held not pity or sympathy, but a strange, unsettling anticipation. Reading Raymond Holbrook's will felt like a mere formality. Their father had built his hotel empire from scratch, starting with a small roadside motel back in 1975. Over the years, his empire had grown to 17 luxury hotels spread across the Midwest. The Holbrook name became synonymous with impeccable service and hospitality. Hospitality isn't just about beds and breakfasts, their father used to say. It's about creating unforgettable experiences, a sense of belonging to something special, even if only for a night. Sterling, the perennial vice president of operations, had been his father's right-hand man for 20 years. He knew every hotel like the back of his hand, effortlessly recalling occupancy rates and revenue forecasts. Sterling's marriage to Miranda from the Ashworth Hotel family had further strengthened the Holbrook position. Their twin daughters, Madison and Mackenzie, were already planning to attend Cornell for hotel management. The succession plan had been meticulously laid out long before their father's tragic heart attack in the library of his Lake Forest home. I had chosen my own path. My job as a chemistry teacher at Lincoln High brought in a modest $48,000 a year, barely enough to cover rent and student loans. But I found satisfaction in seeing students' eyes light up when they grasped complex molecular bonds or successfully conducted an experiment. My father, however, never understood. "You're wasting your potential, Dexter," he'd repeated at every holiday dinner, birthday, and family gathering for the past 15 years. "Your brother is building empires, and you're tinkering with periodic tables." The last time I saw my father alive was at his 71st birthday 3 months ago. Sterling had rented a vast ballroom at the flagship Holbrook Hotel, invited 200 guests, and hired a 12-piece orchestra. I arrived late, coming directly from school where I'd been helping a student with a science fair project. My father looked at me across the glittering room, filled with senators and business magnates, and simply shook his head in disapproval. "Mr. Holbrook was very clear about his final wishes," Uncle Harlan had informed me over the phone. "Both sons must be present." Now, sitting in Harlan's law office, I was beginning to understand the true meaning of those words. The room remained unchanged since my childhood, the same massive oak desk, which had belonged to Harlan's father, the same leather armchairs that creaked with every movement, the same portrait of my grandfather, Samuel Holbrook, who had founded the family's agricultural machinery business in the 1920s. Sterling unceremoniously settled into father's chair as if it were his by right. "Before we begin," Harlan said, pulling out a thick folder, "I need to confirm everyone is present. Sterling Raymond Holbrook." "Here, and ready to get this over with," Sterling replied, glancing at his Rolex. "I have a board meeting at 3. A tense atmosphere filled the boardroom. A board meeting at 3, that casually tossed phrase now took on real significance. "Already planning board meetings?" came the question, laden with hidden meaning. The answer was swift. "Someone has to keep the empire running. Hotels don't manage themselves just because Dad died." Determination and a sense of responsibility for the legacy permeated his words. Harlan continued the legal proceedings, announcing those present, Dexter Allen Holbrook. A concise "here" was the reply, and Vivian Holbrook, present virtually from Florida. My mother's image appeared on the laptop screen. Despite being 65, she looked remarkably younger, her blonde hair impeccably styled, her face maintaining an expression of carefully concealed composure. In the background, the figure of Philip, her new husband, loomed. She had met him at a charity event in Miami and married him 6 months later. My father had ignored the wedding ceremony, citing an urgent conference in Tokyo. Harlan, draped in the mantle of formality, got to the heart of the matter. The estate of Raymond James Holbrook is executed this day, with all provisions to be fulfilled according to his expressed wishes. He scanned those present over his reading glasses and added, "Your father updated this will 6 weeks before his passing. He was extremely meticulous in its wording." Surprise tinged Sterling's voice. 6 weeks ago? He didn't say anything about changes? Harlan's dry reply followed. He wasn't required to. Then he continued reading the will. To my elder son, Sterling Raymond Holbrook, I bequeath the entirety of Holbrook Hospitality Holdings, comprising all 17 properties, associated real estate, the Lake Forest Estate, my vintage car collection, and all related assets, stocks, bonds, and business interests, valued at approximately $50 million. Sterling made no attempt to hide his triumph, leaning back in his chair and lacing his fingers behind his head. He always said I was born for this business, said it was in my blood, he declared with a smug smile. To my younger son, Dexter Allen Holbrook, Harlan continued, bending beneath the table, I bequeath this. He placed the worn brown briefcase on the table. The cracked leather resembled a dried riverbed. The brass corners were green with age, and one of the latches hung at an unnatural angle, as if it had been forced. Silence descended upon the room. Even the street traffic outside seemed to hush. On his mother's face, reflected on the screen, not a muscle twitched, but something elusive flickered in her eyes. Fear? Recognition? It vanished before anyone could quite grasp it. That evening, Dexter sat in his modest one-bedroom apartment, staring at the briefcase on his kitchen table. The dim light of the fluorescent lamp highlighted the details of the worn leather. Sterling had already sent 17 messages, each more boastful than the last. Photos from his father's mansion where he was taking inventory, selfies in front of a Bentley and a 6-car garage, a video tour of the wine cellar with plans to hold the next board meeting there. Don't worry, little brother, his last message read. I'll hire you as a bellhop if teaching doesn't work out, with an entry-level salary and everything. Dexter poured himself a glass of cheap bourbon from the local supermarket, a stark contrast to the vintage bottles his father kept in his study. The briefcase lay on the table like a reprimand. Was this his father's final message? Did it mean he was worth no more than this piece of old junk? He tried again to open the clasps, but to no avail. The locks were jammed solid. Decades of dust and corrosion held them captive. He could have forced the briefcase open, smashed it with a hammer, but something held him back. Perhaps it was Uncle Harlan's gaze when he handed him the briefcase, that strange look of anticipation. Or perhaps it was his mother's face on the screen, how quickly she disconnected, as if unable to bear what was to come. At midnight, Dexter called Jasmine Walker, his colleague, a shop teacher at Lincoln High. They had bonded during cafeteria duty and often commiserated about budget cuts. Dex, it's midnight. Is everything okay? Jasmine asked, concerned. I need a favor. Can you help me open something without damaging it? Dexter replied. Can I ask you to help me open something without damaging it? I asked, full of hope and curiosity. Now you've really got me intrigued, Jasmine replied. Bring it in tomorrow. I'll be in the workshop bright and early, getting ready for the beginner woodworking class. That night was sleepless. Instead of closing my eyes, I dove into the virtual world, trying to find any information about my father's early career. The official Holbrook Hospitality website presented a whitewashed version of his rise. Raymond Holbrook, a visionary entrepreneur, began his journey with a single motel in Springfield and through tireless work and unwavering determination, built an entire empire. Not a word about his past in the insurance business, no mention of the mysterious briefcase. However, I managed to unearth an old newspaper interview from 1976, carefully preserved in the digital archives of the Springfield Gazette. The photograph showed my father, young and ambitious, standing in front of his first motel. In his hand, he held that very briefcase. It is to this briefcase, the caption read, that Raymond Holbrook attributes his success, claiming he never forgot where he started. The next morning, I arrived at school at 6:30. Jasmine was already in the workshop wearing safety goggles and meticulously arranging drill bits. Looks like it's been through the ringer, she observed as I placed the briefcase on her workbench. You could say that. The locks won't budge. She examined them closely, carefully feeling each mechanism. These are high-quality 60s German Abyss locks. Your father didn't skimp, even on his first briefcase. Jasmine pulled out a set of lockpicks and lubricant. The main question is why they're jammed. This kind of damage doesn't just happen with age. It looks more like thermal exposure, as if they've been subjected to extreme temperatures. Can you open them? I asked hopefully. Give me some time. If we force it, we might damage the contents. For an hour, she worked with the patience of a surgeon. Students began gathering for the first class, but she waved them off, telling them to read Chapter 6 of their textbook. I paced behind her, constantly checking my phone. Sterling had sent another message, this time a photo of himself sitting in Dad's chair at the flagship hotel. "Everything's falling into place now," the caption read. "Done!" Jasmine exclaimed as the first lock finally yielded. The click echoed louder than expected in the cluttered workshop. The second lock resisted with more stubbornness, grinding under her picks. Whatever happened to these locks, it melted some of the internal mechanisms. Someone clearly didn't want it opened, or perhaps they just didn't want it to be easy. When the second lock finally gave way, my hands trembled. Jasmine stepped back, giving me space. "Do you want me to leave you alone?" "No, stay. I might need a witness," I replied. Slowly, my heart pounding, I opened the briefcase. The leather hinges groaned, as if portending something significant. Inside lay a single time-yellowed envelope, my name scrawled on it in my father's handwriting. Beneath it, wrapped in plastic, were stacks of documents. The letter was brief, just 3 lines, its meaning eluding me. "Dexter, go to the First National Bank, downtown branch. Account 0037. Tell them you're there to pick something up for Raymond. They'll understand, Dad." "That's quite cryptic," Jasmine commented, peering over my shoulder. "My father was never a cryptic man. He always said what he thought, whether you wanted to hear it or not. Maybe he just wanted everyone to think that. A straightforward hotel magnate with nothing to hide." I picked up the documents wrapped in plastic. Through the cloudy covering, I could see they were old, some typewritten, others handwritten. There were also photographs, black and white faces that were completely unfamiliar to me. "Are you going to the bank?" Jasmine asked. "I have to. It's the only thing he left me, and even if it's just some final cruel joke, I have to know the truth." The next day, I took a personal day, something extremely rare in my 10 years of teaching. My principal, Dr. Rodriguez, sounded concerned. "This isn't like you, Dexter. Is everything all right?" "Family matters," I replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. The drive downtown took a long 40 minutes in morning traffic. The original First National Bank building rose like a limestone fortress among modern glass towers, a relic from the 1920s when banks were built to outlast everything. Marble columns framed the entrance, and the brass doors were so heavy I had to exert considerable effort to open them. Inside, the lobby soared 3 stories high, with ceiling frescoes depicting commerce, industry, and agriculture as Greek goddesses. The majestic bank building exuded an air of unshakable prosperity, resembling an ancient temple where finance, industry, and agriculture played the roles of goddesses of fortune. The presence of old money was palpable here, wealth that needed no display, ingrained in the very fabric of the place. My footsteps echoed on the polished marble as I made my way to the teller's window. "I'm here regarding account 0037, I said, addressing the young woman behind the counter, whose nameplate read Miranda Chen. "I'm picking up a deposit for Raymond Holbrook." Her fingers paused over the computer keyboard. She looked up, studying me carefully, then shifted her gaze to the monitor and back to me. "One moment, please." She picked up the phone, dialed a short number, and spoke a few words in a hushed whisper that didn't reach my ears. "Someone will be with you shortly. Please have a seat." I sank onto a leather bench, whose value likely exceeded that of my car. Other patrons came and went, conducting their usual banking business, while I waited. 5 minutes stretched into 10. I was about to approach the teller again when a man emerged from a door marked Private. He was about 60, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit with silver hair neatly combed back and a face worthy of adorning currency. "Mr. Dexter Holbrook, I'm William Thornley, president of this branch." "We were expecting you." "Expecting me?" "Your father arranged everything in advance. Please, follow me." We passed through the main hall, went through the private door, then down a corridor lined with portraits of former bank executives in massive frames. Thornley used a key card to access an elevator I hadn't noticed before. Its brass trim and wood paneling made it seem an integral part of the building's original construction. "Your father opened account 0037 in 1974, Thornley explained during our descent. "He left clear instructions regarding access. Only two individuals had access, himself and you, but exclusively after his passing. 1974, that's before he got into the hotel business. Precisely, sir, the year before he acquired his first property. The elevator stopped in the basement, which resembled a movie set. The walls were lined with safety deposit boxes, hundreds of them, each with 2 locks. The air felt cool and dry, designed to preserve the secrets people kept there. Thornley led me to a corner where a safety deposit box larger than the others was located. "I'll need to see your identification," he said apologetically. "It's protocol." I handed him my driver's license. He examined it carefully, cross-referenced it with data on his tablet, then nodded. "2 keys are required to open the box. I have the bank's key. Your key should be with you." "I don't have a key." Thornley smiled faintly. "Your father anticipated you might say that. He asked me to tell you to check the lining." "The lining of what?" "He said you'd understand." "The briefcase. I had brought it with me, obeying an instinct that prevented me from leaving it in the car. I placed it on the table and ran my fingers along the inner lining. In a corner, where the leather had slightly pulled away from the frame, I felt something hard. Carefully tearing the fabric, I discovered a small brass key, darkened by time but otherwise intact. "Your father was a man of foresight," Thornley remarked, inserting his key into the lock. "He understood that some things needed to be protected not just from theft, but from prying eyes." We turned the keys simultaneously. The safety deposit box opened with a soft mechanical click that sounded like a pronouncement. Thornley extracted a long metal container and placed it on the table. "I'll leave you to it. Take your time. Press this button when you're finished." He pointed to a mother-of-pearl button on the wall, then exited, silently closing a door I hadn't immediately noticed. I was left alone in the subterranean vault, alone with everything Raymond Holbrook had hidden for 47 years. My hands trembled as I opened the metal container. Inside lay stacks of bearer bonds, gold certificates, and cash in denominations so old some looked foreign. A quick tally made me feel slightly dizzy. $3 million, perhaps more, in untraceable assets. But it wasn't the money that made me hold my breath. It was the manila folder beneath them, bulging with documents and photographs. I opened it with a cautiousness, as if it might explode. He opened the folder with extreme caution, as if fearing an explosion. The first thing that caught his eye was his own face on a birth certificate. However, under father, it listed not Raymond Holbrook, but Vincent Corvino. A name previously unknown, now forever linked to his life, like a shadow whose existence he had never suspected. The certificate trembled in his hands. The next document was a newspaper clipping from the Chicago Tribune, dated March 15, 1985. The headline read, "Federal Witness Dies in Car Bombing Near Courthouse." The article vividly described the tragic events. Vincent Corvino, a businessman who had agreed to testify against a major money laundering operation run by the Torelli family, was brutally murdered. His car had been bombed in the courthouse parking lot. The force of the explosion was so great that it severely damaged 3 neighboring vehicles. Surprisingly, no one else was injured, raising suspicions among investigators. It seemed someone knew precisely when Corvino would be alone. Every sentence of that article rewrote his entire life. Vincent Corvino was about to provide irrefutable evidence of how the Torelli family laundered millions of dollars through an extensive network of legitimate businesses across the Midwest. His sudden death destroyed a meticulously prepared federal case. Without his testimony, about 36 suspected gangsters evaded justice and remained free. The next discovery was a photograph that made him sink into the viewing room chair. The image showed his mother, young and radiant, perhaps 25 years old. She stood between 2 men against the backdrop of a construction site that resembled a hotel. One of the men was Raymond, recognizable by his confident posture and strong jawline. The other man looked like his double, as if he had stepped out of a historical drama. The same narrow face, the same wave of dark hair, the same eyes that, as his mother always said, he had inherited from his grandfather. But it wasn't his grandfather. Vincent Corvino had his arm around his mother's waist. She was leaning into him, smiling in a way he had never seen her smile at Raymond. Then came other photographs, Vincent and Raymond at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, They shook hands over architectural blueprints, a Christmas party where Vincent held a baby. Judging by the date on the back, December 1986, it was him, 10 months old. Next were contracts, typewritten on an old IBM Select Electric, with notary seals and witness signatures. The heading read, Corvino Holbrook Enterprises, Inc. The documents detailed a partnership established back in 1974. Vincent Corvino provided an initial capital of $2 million in cash for Raymond Holbrook to acquire and renovate 3 roadside motels. Raymond was to manage operations while Vincent remained a sleeping partner. Profits were split 60-40, with the larger share going to Vincent. But there was a clause that made him reread it 3 times to ensure he understood correctly. In the event of the death of one partner, their share shall pass to their eldest male heir upon reaching the age of 40. In the absence of a male heir, the share shall pass to the surviving partner. Vincent had died when he was just 14 months old. According to these papers, on his 40th birthday, he was set to inherit 30% of everything Raymond had built. Sterling owned 70%, not 100. Not the entire empire he believed was his by birthright. The last document in the folder was a handwritten letter from Raymond on company letterhead, dated 3 weeks before his passing. Dexter, if you're reading this, you're standing in a bank vault, realizing that your entire life has been a carefully constructed lie designed to keep you alive. Your biological father was Vincent Corvino, my best friend and business partner. We met in 1973 when I was selling insurance, and he was looking for legitimate investments for money whose origins, frankly, I didn't ask about. Vincent wasn't a hardened criminal, but he was, alas, no stranger to the underworld. He grew up in that environment, shared school desks with the offspring of gangsters, and even striving for a different life, couldn't escape its pull. A fateful meeting with your mother at a New Year's Eve gala in 1984 turned his world upside down. She worked as a secretary at my insurance company, and Vincent, as they say, was smitten. They married 6 months later, and a year after that, you were born. Those 14 months were perhaps the happiest period of his life, but the idyll was shattered by the FBI's intrusion. They had a recording of Vincent's conversation with an Anthony Torelli about financial irregularities. He was offered a deal, testimony in exchange for immunity and witness protection for his entire family. Vincent agreed, driven by the desire to shield you and your mother, but the Torelli clan found out. They were always well informed. The explosion that ended Vincent's life was a sinister message, but the FBI couldn't prove the mafia's involvement. Your mother was left alone with an infant whose father's name sounded like a death sentence. That's when she came to me. I had just married Sterling's mother, Patricia. We agreed that I would raise you as my own son, ensuring you would never be associated with the Corvino name. Your mother and I staged a charade, pretending we had an affair, and you were the result. Patricia went along with this lie to protect an innocent child. She passed away believing you were my blood, and I lied to her. The Torellis, meanwhile, believed Vincent's line had ended. They had no reason to seek out a son everyone thought was the offspring of a successful hotel chain owner, Raymond Holbrook. You were hidden in plain sight, cloaked in the armor of my name. Every harsh word, every criticism of your career aspirations, every comparison to Sterling, all of it was designed to keep you in the shadows, to make you unremarkable. Mafia bosses might ignore a high school chemistry teacher, but they would never overlook a hotel executive managing millions. However, Vincent's share in our joint business remains valid. Lawyers confirm the contract is flawless. On your 40th birthday, you can claim it. Sterling will resist, but he will lose. Vincent was too clever, and I ensured the documentation was impeccable. The money in this safe also belongs to you. These are Vincent's personal savings, which I preserved. Use them as you see fit, but be careful when formalizing your claim to the business share. The Torelli family has a long memory, though most of the old guard are either dead or serving time in prison. Your mother knows everything. She keeps her distance to maintain the legend. The man she married in Florida, Philip, is a former FBI agent who was part of the task force trying to protect Vincent. He is her bodyguard, not a husband in the true sense of the word. I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused you. Every resentful glance from you broke my heart. But emotional wounds heal, unlike the death of a son. You were never my disappointment, Dexter. You were my triumph because you lived. Raymond, the only father you ever knew. I spent 3 long hours in the vault room, trying to reevaluate my entire life. Every sharp remark from Raymond, every attempt to diminish my worth, every comparison to Sterling that cut me like glass, all of it was for my protection. He played the villain in my story to shield me from the real villains, who would have unhesitatingly taken the life of Vincent Corvino's son. I photographed every document with my phone, then carefully returned everything to the safety deposit box, keeping only the letter. Thornley was waiting outside when I pressed the mother-of-pearl button. "Will you be taking the contents today, Mr. Holbrook?" "No, not yet. I need some time to process everything." "Your father said you might say that. The box rental is paid for 10 years in advance. It will be here when you're ready." I headed straight to Uncle Harlan's office. His secretary tried to assure me he was in a meeting, but I walked past her. Harlan was alone, studying a report, and showed no surprise when I entered. The moment I walked in, he was ready to talk. "You knew," I said, placing Raymond's letter on his desk. "You knew absolutely everything." He slowly removed his reading glasses and folded them neatly. "I was directly involved in drafting the original partnership agreements back in 1974. I witnessed Vincent and Raymond shake hands on their first joint venture. I was present at Vincent and your mother's wedding, though we all later pretended that event never happened. And yes, I knew who your real father was. Sterling doesn't suspect. Sterling tends to see only what he wishes, the golden boy destined to inherit an entire empire. He won't see you until the documents are officially filed on your 40th birthday, and that's still 18 months away. 18 months? Vincent showed exceptional foresight in drafting the contract's terms. The shares are indisputable and cannot be sold for 10 years from their official formalization. Whether he likes it or not, you will become Sterling's business partner. 30% of the shares give you enough leverage to block any major decisions. You will be guaranteed a seat on the board of directors, voting rights, and full access to all financial reports. Every hotel bearing Sterling's name will, to some extent, bear yours as well. I pictured Sterling's smug face, his triumphant champagne celebration, his offers to hire me as a bellhop. He'll likely be furious, but legally, there's nothing he can do. I personally made sure of that. Your father, Raymond, insisted we meticulously vet every detail. The contract is flawless. And the Torellis? Anthony Torelli died in federal prison 5 years ago. His son, Michael, currently runs a restaurant in Phoenix. He claims to be running an entirely legitimate business. The FBI hasn't linked him to any illegal activities in 10 years. That world is mostly in the past. You're likely safe, though I still strongly advise against drawing undue attention to yourself when you formalize your shares. The next day, I returned to teaching. My students noticed nothing unusual about Mr. Holbrook, who, as if nothing had happened, explained covalent bonds and balanced equations. Sterling continued to inundate me with boastful messages, photos from board meetings where he sat in his father's chair, snapshots of him redecorating the office, news of firing his father's old secretary because he wanted to build his own team. To each message, I replied the same. "Congratulations. Well done. Sounds great." 2 weeks later, I visited my mother in Florida. When I arrived, she was sitting by the pool reading a book about orchids. Philip was in the kitchen, visible through the sliding doors. He watched us, making no attempt to hide it. "You went to the bank," she stated, not asked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you're a terrible liar, Dexter. You get that from Vincent. He couldn't lie either, which is why the FBI loved him as a witness. If you had known the truth, it would have shown on your face every time someone mentioned your father, and that could have cost you your life. You loved him, Vincent, more than anyone, including me. And I love you with all my heart. But Vincent was a love that felt like it could shatter the universe. It made everything else seem dull by comparison. We only had 14 months, and Raymond saved us. He gave you a name, a life, the chance to grow up without constantly looking over your shoulder. I couldn't love him the way I loved Vincent, but I respected him. He knew that was enough. Now, that briefcase stands in my apartment, fully restored. I repaired the locks, treated the leather, polished the brass. Inside, I keep photographs of my 2 fathers. Vincent Corvino, who gave me life and died trying to do what was right, and Raymond Holbrook, who gave me his name and lived a lie to keep me safe. In 18 months, when I turn 40, I will walk into that boardroom with documents that will shatter Sterling's perfect world. He will be furious. He will yell. He will threaten. He will probably try to buy me out, but I won't sell. Not for any price. Because it's not about the money. It's about a father who loved me enough to let me hate him. It's about a biological father who chose justice over safety. It's about realizing that sometimes the most humble inheritance holds the greatest value. The burden of inherited secrecy proves to be the heaviest of all. Often, my students wonder why I continue to teach when my family owns an entire hotel chain. I tell them that chemistry teaches us the most impressive reactions occur when seemingly incompatible elements combine. It's like a gangster's son raised by his right-hand man. Like an immense fortune hidden in an unassuming briefcase, like a harsh paternal upbringing that conceals a deep love. Indeed, Sterling inherited the visible empire, but I inherited the knowledge of the truth. And in 18 months, that truth will enter his office, take a seat at his negotiating table, and remind him that, in chemistry as in life, the most crucial elements are often the unexpected ones. Some sons are born into a certain family, others choose their own path, and sometimes a seemingly worthless briefcase holds everything of real value. Perhaps the Torellis were involved in Vincent Corvino's death. Sterling may own a significant share of Holbrook hospitality, but I remain here, teaching chemistry at an ordinary school, awaiting my 40th birthday. Like a chemical reaction waiting for the right catalyst. And when that day comes, when I finally claim my right to Vincent Corvino's legacy, I will remember the lesson taught by both my fathers. Survival doesn't depend on strength, wealth, or fame. Sometimes, survival lies in the ability to remain unnoticed until it is no longer necessary.